What's up, everybody? I'm PumaPete.
And I am Moosen.
And we're Friendly Fire Co-op back, having another kind of, we're going to call Fireside chat about Divinity Original Sin. And this one we're going to talk about the different classes in the game and kind of how they interact with one another, give our opinions on that, and then kind of give a little bit of overall ranking with how we feel they are strength-wise now, in case you're looking to create a character and are kind of looking for a little bit of feedback on the current kind of playability of each class. And we're going to focus mostly just on the starting skills, because with the attributes and the abilities, you can obviously kind of tweak. You can customize attributes, abilities, and talents before you even start. The only thing that you can't change are starting skills. So we're going to start. We're going to go through, we're going to talk about all the classes' starting skills and kind of explain how they work, because although there's a little bit of explanation, there's kind of some parts that they're leaving out of each skill. And then from there, we will talk about kind of how we've ranked the classes 1 to 11. And that'll be about it. So yeah, just a little bit of that. Again, with each class, you can eventually turn them into kind of whatever class you want. So it doesn't really matter too much what you start with, but it can definitely impact the first couple levels of the game, which can often be very difficult, depending on what class you pick. So we're going to start off with the fighter. Starts off with 3 skills, Rush, Dust Devil, and Melee Power Stance. Rush is a pretty useful ability to close the gap.
It's your bread and butter warrior.
Yeah, it's a charge. Well, actually, with the most recent update, Rush can hit more than one person.
I thought it could in the past update.
No, it didn't seem to work. Yeah, you could charge through people and it wouldn't do the damage. But now Rush does damage. It can knock down the person that you hit, and it has 15-meter range, so it's pretty nice for closing the gap, which is obviously important for melee characters. Dust Devil, pretty standard whirlwind ability. Just spin in a circle, do part of your damage to all of the enemies in the circle. One pretty nice bonus of Dust Devil is that it does not hurt allies. It will only hit enemies. So that is pretty useful, because some AoE in this game definitely can hurt everybody. And then Melee Power Stance will just boost the damage that you do, but it's at a sacrifice. It takes more action points, and also you have a lower chance to hit an enemy. So Melee Power Stance is kind of good if the enemy's knocked down and you're just looking to kind of beat on them, but it will take away some of the damage that you can do. With that covered, we'll move on to Knight.
Well, the Knight starts with 3 abilities: Cure Wound, Encourage, and Rush. We already covered Rush. It's the dash. And Encourage is an AoE buff to all of your teammates. I think it does extra damage, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it boosts a couple stats from what I remember. I think I want to say it's Strength, Perception, and Intelligence, although that might be incorrect. It might be Willpower. Don't
quote us on that. And Cure Wounds is just it's a heal, I believe. It's a small heal. It's like very close range, so like if you're in melee range, you should be able to use it, but it's not going to go very far.
Yeah, the Knight's kind of like the hard support melee class is kind of the best way to describe them. Like, they have that rush, but their other 2 abilities are definitely both support abilities, so...
Yeah. They start with a ton of strength, though.
Right, but, I mean, again, that's something that... I mean, you can make any class start with a lot of strength, so... That's kind of something that's hard to discuss with regards to character creation. They do start with a 2-hander, though, instead of the sword and shield that the warrior starts with. The Knight is a 2-hander, which is kind of interesting considering it's the sport class, so it's kind of harder to stay alive.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. We will talk about the strengths and weaknesses of that class later in the video. The Ranger, standard issue, kind of archer, hunter class, whatever you would like to call them. Starts with 3 abilities. They have the ranged power stance, which, much like the warrior power stance, will give you an increased chance to miss, and also it'll cost extra action points, but it will do more damage. So kind of against that trade-off kind of ability. Ricochet, fire normal arrow that damages one target and then ricochets to another target. So Ranger actually got, I think, the biggest nerf out of any of the classes in the last update.
Oh man,
they used to have
just like smacked with nerf back.
Yeah, they had a crazy AoE cone ability. That would just do absurd amount of damage. If you watched our first playthrough, you saw Mason use that. Ricochet still has AoE, definitely not nearly as strong as it used to be. And then Tactical Retreat is the jump that the Ranger can do to kind of get out of sticky situations. It can leap up into the air and then come down. So
I
pretty.
think it's about as long as Rush.
Yeah, a lot of
shorter.
the abilities in the game seem to have like that standard 15-meter range. So I definitely would not be surprised if that's what it is.
And it leaves a smoke screen.
Yeah.
And
So
I think that blinds, but I'm not 100% sure.
yeah, definitely a pretty solid set of abilities that the Ranger has. Now we will go ahead and move on to the Rogue.
Oh man, the Rogue. Well, you see, he has Walk in Shadows, Fast Track, and Venomous Strike. Venomous Strike you're not going to be using very much in the early game, since literally everything is almost a zombie. And it will heal everything by giving poison damage to your daggers.
Everyone's a zombie.
Literally everybody's a zombie. You, me, Medora, Jahan, even the dogs.
You can take a trait that, the dogs are zombies. You can take a trait that makes you a zombie. Heals you from poison, but then you can't heal yourself with regular effects.
Yeah, that's the worst. Fast Track. Well, I would say Venomous Strike is literally the worst. Out of anything. Literally the worst for the beginning of the game. But Fast Track and Walk in Shadows. Fast Track, what it does is it makes your movements cost less points. It gives you more points to use, and it increases your recovery as well. And but it has an 18-turn cooldown. And I guess you kind of pop it if you want to like one-shot somebody with, I mean, not really one-shot. You attack them like 40 times.
Yeah,
but
just like one turn they die in because you just
Yeah.
get so many attacks. How long does Fast Track last? Do you know?
it lasts 2 turns
Oh wow,
after you
that
cast
is
it.
not a very long amount of time.
Yeah, but you can still, keep your points after that though.
Okay.
And then Walk in Shadows. This, well, you turn invisible for 5 turns. And that's basically all it does. You can't be seen. If you take a damage, it will, reveal you. So don't stand in the way of anybody with, like, skill shots, for lack of a better term.
Yeah. It's basically the Rogue's ability to actually get in close range to
get away.
enemies. Yeah, or get away.
But I may have used that wrong.
It's such a long cooldown though that you really have to kind of pick whether you want to use it to get in close or get away. So it's it's definitely a tricky balance with the Rogue. But
Yeah.
all right, we'll go ahead and move on to the Shadowblade. Shadowblade is kind of like the Rogue Mage hybrid type class. So much like the Rogue, they have Venomous Strike, which is Mason covered, is that melee poison, which, as you said earlier, yeah, not too helpful because of the high amount of things that are healed from poison. Bloodletting is a witchcraft ability. It does physical damage and it can also cause the target to bleed, and it has a 15-meter range. So Bloodletting is a pretty solid ability early game, especially for a class that otherwise has no other way to attack from afar, because the Shadowblade doesn't start with a bow. Maybe they do.
Yeah, they do.
Okay, Shadowblade does start with a bow. But yeah, Bloodletting definitely helpful. And last, Headvice, another ranged ability. I'm pretty sure that's Air Elementalist.
Yep.
And it just does a little bit of damage, and it can cause blind on the opponent.
Which is super helpful.
Yeah. So overall, the Shadowblade is probably the more solid pick to the Rogue. They don't have that quite as much reliability on their escape. They can't go invisible, so it's kind of a trade-off between the melee and the range that you have to sacrifice if you want to go Shadowblade over Rogue. And that we will head over to the Wayfarer.
Alright, the Wayfarer has 3 skills. One is Summon Wolf, along with a couple of other classes. I think Witch starts with it as well.
Yeah, Witch also starts with it.
It summons a Wolf Companion, and you can use them to move around. They actually do a ton of damage and have a high chance of inflicting bleed on attack. And they move tons of points as well.
They're really squishy, though.
Yeah, they take like 2 hits.
And it seems as if the AI wants to target them.
Yes.
So
at least they soak up a couple hits.
Yeah, if nothing else, they'll soak up some hits, and if they get a couple attacks off, they do a lot of damage. It's kind of a very glass cannon-y summon.
They also have Minor Heal, which, is, if you can't guess, it is a ranged heal, and it heals a target over several turns. And then they have a poison dart, which, you know, still not helpful at the beginning of the game.
Yeah, it
Thanks,
actually...
Larian.
I'm pretty sure it doesn't even... Alright, so it used to do damage when it would make contact with the enemy. At this point, from my experience with it, I don't even think it does damage.
It creates...
It only poisons.
It poisons on the surface, man.
Yeah, but, alright, so it doesn't do, like, contact damage, right? If you have Flare, and you shoot an enemy with Flare, it'll cause Warm, and it'll also do fire damage. If you have a Poison Dart, it doesn't do damage, it can only poison. And that's a change, so that's kind of a nerf to Poison Dart. And I think it got nerfed because it's a wizard ability, and as we'll cover soon, the wizard's pretty strong. Bonus to the Wayfarer, it is a ranged class, though. It does have a bow, so the bow with the variety of arrows you can get always kind of makes any of the bow classes pretty versatile. So
tons of CC regardless of what skills you have.
Yeah, but now we'll head over to the Witch. The Witch has 4 abilities, the first of which being Oath of Desecration, which is a pretty solid...
First of which?
Oh, I see what I accidentally did there. But anyway, Oath of Desecration, pretty solid damage buff. Awesome if you can get it on your wolf. If you summon the wolf, then you go with Desecration. It gets so many attacks with the damage buff that's really good. Same with a rogue with the haste. The Oath of Desecration is pretty solid, and even Medora just does tons of damage if you have it. So that's a pretty awesome early game ability. Staff of Magus, significantly less awesome. It's kind of any of the like ranged mage classes come with that as their starting ability. It's their way of kind of their equivalent of an auto attack, but it does not do a lot of damage at all.
But it scales.
It does. It scales with the weapon.
Yes.
But it's just not. It's not particularly great. It's kind of what you use if everything else is on cooldown.
Yep.
Summon Wolf, we already covered that in the Wayfarer, just a little summon that can do some damage for you. And Bloodletting, already covered that in the Shadowblade as well. That ranged melee or ranged physical damage ability that can also cause bleeding. So pretty solid skill set overall, except Staff of Magus, which admittedly all mage classes come with.
Worst.
So it's kind of, you can't really avoid it. Next class, Wizard.
Wizard. It has the almighty Midnight Oil and Flare combo that Peter loves so much.
It's so good early game.
Yeah. Because you see, you do flare damage, and the Midnight Oil just creates this giant pool of stuff. Pool of oil that sets on fire. And it slows as well if you don't want to set the oil on fire, so it helps deter people. As well as they have Staff of Mages, like every mage. And Poison Dart, just like the Wayfarer? Yeah.
Yeah.
But really good to start out with.
Yeah, admittedly, Poison Dart and Staff of Magus, not the best abilities, but just being able to start with Midnight Oil and Flare is just so strong. Next class, Battlemage. Definitely another one of the hybrid classes between kind of the warrior and the mage. It starts with Enfeebling Touch, which is a witchcraft ability that will weaken the enemy. Just kind of it's short range, like 3 meter melee, or kind of melee range-ish ability. Not the best debuff, but not terrible. Staff of Magus, which we covered already. The interesting thing about the Battlemage, though, is they don't come equipped with a staff. So if you want to go with the Staff of Magus, you're going to have to trade off your sword and shield, which is the default equipment for a staff. I'm currently playing the Battlemage in our playthrough, and I'm going with the sword and shield. I'm just completely abandoning the idea of using Staff of Magus, and I think that's a lot better. But it's kind of, depending on which direction you want to go with the hybrid, if you want to go more mage-oriented or more warrior-oriented. Burning Touch, pretty nice to have a fire ability early game. It is another one of the 3 meter spells, so shorter range, but I think it has a 100% chance to set the enemy on fire minus fire resistance. So not 100% overall, but pretty solid chance to set enemies on fire, which is awesome. Also really good for breaking down doors in the early game. I know that kind of sounds weird, but can definitely come in handy if you're lacking some keys that you need. And last, Crushing Fist. Really awesome ranged CC ability that warriors can get. 15 meters, and I don't know the exact percent chance, but it is a knockdown ability, so Really, really awesome ability to have early game to deal with some of the tougher enemies if you need to knock them over.
Yep,
Go on.
I agree. Solid CC.
Yeah. Cleric.
Cleric. Yeah, they too have a minor heal, but unlike the other classes, they actually start with a blunt weapon. I believe they are the only class that does that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure right on that.
And they have the skill Divine Light as well, which is it's a cone, I believe.
Yeah.
It's a cone that does what?
It does fire
damage.
Yeah. So pretty awesome early game again.
Yeah.
Against the zombies. A little tricky though, because alright, so the tooltip says hit nearby enemies with a Divine Light. It hits allies too.
Yes.
So the tooltip's a bit confusing.
Want to take one guess how we figured that out?
I may have shot Mason with it.
Yes.
Yeah.
He did. He's a big jerk.
But yeah, Divine Light pretty solid. Early game AoE.
And they also start with melee power stance, which is it's not bad. It's not great.
We covered in the warrior section, just a little bit damage buff if you're looking to try to do some extra damage. And I believe that puts us on the last class, the Enchanter, who is kind of like the ultimate utility mage early game.
Jahan.
Yeah, Jahan has a lot of these skills minus Slow Current, but 4 abilities, Staff of Mages, which we already covered. Slow Current, which is a slow that you can cast on a single target. So slow will lower action points overall, so they can move less and attack less, versus Bitter Cold, which will chill an enemy. Chill does not reduce action points, it just takes more action points to move. So they can still attack the same amount of times, but they can't move as far. And also, if you cast Chill on an already chilled opponent, it will freeze them. So pretty solid CC again, much like Slow Current. And Teleportation, which something we demonstrated in the first playthrough. Pretty helpful, can move an enemy away if you need to, can move an ally.
Control the hell out of your allies.
Yeah, control your allies, but you can move an ally into range if you need to. It does do damage, so if you cast it on an ally, that's kind of something you have to be concerned about.
It does like 7 damage, though.
Yeah, overall, Teleportation is more of a CC ability. Super awesome, though. Yeah. It's great for dealing with explosive skeletons, because you can pick them up and kind of drop them.
On their friends.
Yeah, on their friends. So, Teleportation, awesome ability. Overall, Enchanter has pretty solid skill set. And I believe that's the last ability. So now we'll go ahead and cover the rankings. And the 5 kind of criteria we're using for the rankings. Number 1 is survivability, which is just their ability to survive the early game. This can come from higher armor, such like the melee classes, or good escapes, or kind of just the ability to keep enemies away from you. Number 2, damage capability, obviously important to be able to do a lot of damage, particularly AoE early game, because a lot of times you're going to be outnumbered, especially if you don't get your companions right away. Number 3 is crowd control, obviously being able to deal with use some abilities to kind of delay the overwhelming mass of undead that you're going to face early game. Pretty helpful. 4, effectiveness specifically against early game foes. Like we mentioned, a lot of zombies, so definitely can hurt the effectiveness of some of the classes. And number 5, synergy with early companions. Early game, your only 2 options are Medora and Jahan, and they have some abilities that are pretty similar to some of the other classes that you're already running. So it can be tricky if you run classes very similar to Medora and Jahan. It really limits your overall amount of abilities that you can utilize early game. So with that in mind, the first number 1 ranked ability is the Wizard, or number 1 ranked class is the Wizard, and that's mostly just for the Midnight Oil Flare combo that he has. It's just so good early game at dealing. It deals awesome with the zombies because fire will cancel out the poison.
And the slow just completely...
Yeah, it really limits the enemy's ability to get near you. So those 2 abilities alone kind of put the Wizard, not necessarily in a class of its own, but enough that it is pretty much definitively the number 1. So if you're new to the game, or looking just for kind of an easier run at the beginning, Wizard definitely the number 1 choice, especially for mages. Number 2 class is the Cleric. I forget which direction he's in. There we go. Cleric, number 2, has some pretty solid survivability with the sword and shield. He has the heavier armor. He can also heal. So the heal plus all of that, a lot of survivability. Does have the AoE damage, so pretty good damage capabilities.
if you're looking for just like the bread and butter tank character,
yeah, I think the Cleric is definitely probably the best early game melee character. And I played the Cleric, I've played the Knight, and I haven't played the Warrior. Mason played the Warrior, but I'm familiar with the Warrior's abilities. And I feel like Cleric has enough, kind of covers a wide breadth of like areas, so definitely pretty solid. Number 3 is the Ranger. Even though the Ranger got nerfed, it does have the ability to escape. It has a nice AoE ability, even if it's only a couple enemies. And the ability to use all of the different arrows gives the Ranger just a ton of utility.
Yeah.
Because you can get the explosive arrows, you can get water arrows, you get fire arrows, stun arrows. There's just a lot the Ranger can do based purely off of its, affinity for bows. Yeah. So Ranger, definitely a solid early game class. Number 4 is Wayfarer. And as we just mentioned with the Ranger, the bow is an awesome advantage.
But they also have a heal.
Yeah, they have a heal. So they don't have the escape, they don't have the AoE, but they have a heal. So Wayfarer...
And they have another companion.
Yeah. Wayfarer more of a support than the Ranger. So depending on, what your companion, what your second person is using, the Wayfarer may actually be a better fit. But from purely looking at each class in a vacuum, Wayfarer is probably slightly less than the Ranger. Number 5, we're going to give it to Battlemage. The Battlemage has a lot of, different... Battlemage plays a lot different than any of the other classes because you're kind of switching things in and out.
But they do have a lot of CC.
Yeah, they have the CC. They can use the fire.
As fire and be slightly tankier with the whole shield.
Yeah, so Battlemage is kind of a happy medium between everything. Minus, I mean, you can even go range if you choose to go with the staff, but I choose to not to. But Battlemage is definitely a fun class. It has a lot of directions you can take it into, so that's kind of, if you're kind of split between what you want to play, Battlemage is a good idea. Number 6, we have the Fighter. The Fighter is really solid. It has a lot of,
don't get us wrong. The Fighter's a great class.
Yeah,
but there's Medora.
Yeah. So the problem with the Fighter is all 3 of the Fighter's abilities Medora has. So
and she starts with better armor and a better sword.
Yeah, and she has the Crushing Fist ability that the Battlemage has. So you can take the Fighter, and maybe if you're doing a lone wolf playthrough, the Fighter may actually be, higher on the list. Because the abilities it comes with are awesome, it just doesn't synergize very well at all with the early game.
Yeah.
So, and that kind of is, the next one we have on the list, number 7, is the Enchanter. And it's kind of the same idea. The Enchanter, awesome skill set, but Jahan has 3 of these 4 abilities, and you can pick up Slow Current from an early game vendor if you want Jahan to have that. So, if you take the Enchanter, you're going to run into a lot of the same ability clashing that you would kind of with the Fighter. So again, Lone Wolf, maybe the Enchanter moves up higher, but for now, he's at number 7. Number 8, we're going to go with the Witch. The Witch isn't bad. He just doesn't do anything that great. The Wolf is nice, but other classes have the Wolf, and the Wolf can be kind of squishy. Oath of Desecration is pretty good damage boost, but it doesn't really help the Witch alone. And Bloodletting is kind of like an average ranged attack. It doesn't have any awesome synergy like Flare does.
And if the bleed misses.
Yeah, and if the bleed misses, it's a really, really average ability. So, Witch maybe not bad if you're looking for a more support mage that doesn't clash with Jahan, but Witch definitely not one of the strongest starting classes. Number 9 is Shadowblade.
Shadowblade has some ranged abilities which are helpful. Again, it's bloodletting, and then it has a blind. But the venomous strike and the fact that it's you start with a dagger and leather armor,
super squishy, very little survivability.
Like
it doesn't have an escape.
Mage is squishy.
Yeah, you have a lot of issues with the Shadowblade, and it only has melee attacks, so definitely one of the trickier ones to play with. Number 10 is the Rogue.
Oh dear lord, the Rogue.
Doesn't have any of the ranged benefits that a Shadowblade has.
Yeah.
And the Venomous Strike is really bad early game against zombies, which is most of what you're fighting.
Yeah. And one of our Let's Play episodes upcoming, you can see just how squishy I am.
Yeah, it really kind of highlighted just how not useful the rogue is early game.
Yeah, I literally go from 100% health to 0 in one hit.
Yeah, so...
And not even by any big monster.
No, it was just a normal encounter. So, I mean,
Yep.
Fast Track's definitely a good ability. Definitely one of the best abilities. It just doesn't make up for the other downfalls that the rogue has. And
Yeah.
the high cooldowns on Walk and Shadows and Fast Track really kind of...
if you don't save up a lot of action points, you do absolutely 0 damage.
Yeah.
Because
So-
while you hit twice every turn, you hit for like 8 damage.
Yeah.
Whereas Medora swings in for a whopping 70 per...
Yeah, Rogue
hit on-
Rogue definitely needs some balance changes, but I don't know.
Right, please.
Yeah. And in last place is the Knight, who I played, and just the Knight doesn't do anything good. So
The Knight is like the Swiss Army knife of characters.
I guess, but not even a good Swiss Army knife. Like, all right,
It's like a Swiss Army knife missing the can opener.
yeah, it has the rush, so it can get in there, and once it's in there, it's kind of useless. The two-handed sword does do more damage than a one-handed, but early game, especially if you're playing on a harder difficulty, the Knight has like no survivability at all.
Like, what are they gonna do? Rush in and try and
It
heal
can
the
only
enemy?
it can only auto attack. Cure Wounds is an extremely small heal in comparison to minor heal, so it's not even that useful. And then Willpower, buff's nice, but it's not going to get you through the early game alone. So overall, the Knight definitely avoid it in its current state, unless you're really looking to challenge yourself or you're really looking for a support melee class. Not
Support.
totally...
If you're looking for a support melee class, go Cleric.
Yeah, definitely Cleric is the infinitely better option over Knight, but, again, all the classes can turn into whatever you want to turn them into, so really this is only the early game, but I would definitely recommend staying away from Knight in its current state.
And remember, this is all our opinions.
Yeah.
Yours might vary.
I've put in a decent amount of time. Mason's put in slightly less time than me, but we've both definitely put in a lot of time into the game. I've played almost every single class, definitely used all of these abilities. But again, it's just our opinion. Feel free to disagree. Feel free to leave comments on, where you think they rank.
Feel free to subscribe. Hint, hint.
Thanks, Mason, for that. But yeah, that's all for us in this video. Thanks for watching, guys. And as Mason mentioned, I guess feel free to subscribe for more daily Divinity Original Sin videos and quests, guys. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.
Bye.